Welcome back to the Band Guide. I'm your band guy, Colin, and today, as we wrap up 2023, I wanted to share with you some of my most used tools this year, my favorite plugins this year. Now, to be clear, just getting into it, my most used plugins are definitely hands down EQ and compression, but that's not a particularly fun year in review. The plugins that we're going to be talking about in this series, we're going to do a video this week on free plugins and next week on some of the affordable third-party plugins I really love, are going to be more about getting a specific sound that you kind of can't get without these plugins or tools that just unlock different kinds of possibilities for you or kind of get you out of sticky situations. So it's either just a really cool specific sound or something that kind of helps fix a specific problem. So we're going to be looking at both in this series. And again, today we're looking at the free ones. But before we get into it, as I said, the most used plugins in all my mixes, hands down, without a doubt, are EQ and compression. And at the end of the day, to get a great mix, you need to be applying EQ and compression and the other fundamentals of mixing better. If you're struggling to get a mix that you're happy with, these fun, exciting tools aren't going to be what changes it for you. It's going to be those fundamentals. So I want to give you something for free to help with that. It's my 6-step checklist to a pro mix, and just goes through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them wherever it is that you're making music. It's completely free from the link in the description below, so be sure to pick it up. It's really going to help you get a better mix. It's the same process I follow for all of my mixes, and it's the same steps that all professional mixes have. So it's definitely going to help you out. But let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at our first plugins, which is Simatics Origin. This is a super cool vintage plugin. The idea here is that it's going to give you a vintage effect on whatever you put it on. And I've known about this plugin for years. I've used it occasionally for years, but in 2023, I used it all the time. There's just something about this plugin this year for some reason. Ended up on maybe every mix I did, or near every mix, if not every single mix. And the first example I want to show you here is just it on a synth. So this synth is kind of a high frequency, cool lead line thing that comes in at the end of the song without Simatics Origin on. It sounds like this. In the context of the mix. And what I want to do is kind of tuck it back in a little bit, give it kind of a cool vintagey sound. And I thought, well, I know the plugin for that, the vintage plugin from Simatics, right? Origin. So basically here we have a high pass filter or high cut filter. This is just going to cut out all your high frequencies around the point that you set. And then you have some noise options. This would be emulating like a tape machine or a cassette player. We have chorus, which is a big part of the sound here, which is going to give you a little extra modulation and stereo width. We have wow and flutter movement, which is kind of a pitch shifting thing that's really cool. Kind of emulates like a warble in a vinyl. And then we have saturation, which is just distortion. And then we have a few other options here. So here I'm doing a fair amount of movement, a little bit of chorus, a good amount of distortion or saturation, and just a little bit of filtering. So in solo, if we listen to this, this is off, and then I'll engage it. That's cool, right? Take it back off. Really cool. And again, I just couldn't get that sound. There's other plugins that do this, but this one's free and sounds great. And I seriously, I think I've used it in every mix this year. Let me show you really quickly on one other example, this pitched up guitar here. So this is doing a very similar thing without this plugin on. This guitar line sounds like this. Add it on, it sounds like this. Put them in the context of the mix. Just cool. They just add to the vibe. They fit the vibe of the song. So if you want to do something that's kind of vibey, lo-fi, vinyl-y, vintagey, this is definitely your plugin. It's completely free from Simatics. It's called Origin, so definitely pick it up. This is definitely my favorite plugin for something like this. Okay, my second plugin is a stock Logic plugin. So free if you have Logic. I definitely get that that's not free if you don't have Logic, but if you have Logic, this is free. It's already included. And here we have a kick drum, and this kick drum is fine. It's a fine recording, but I wanted kind of this massive kick drum that's really distorted and just huge sounding. And so what I did is used Fat Effects, which is something I really haven't used much, but I really wanted to try it out here. And basically what Fat Effects is doing is it's taking the sub frequencies and enhancing them around 60 hertz. And then it's also adding a little bit of distortion. So these are the two main areas. I guess I'm doing a little bit of compression here. To be honest, I'm not even positive I knew I was doing that. That's kind of my main gripe with any plugin like this, is there's so much going on. It's easy to accidentally do something you don't even realize it's doing. But the main thing I'm doing here is the distortion and the bass enhancer. And what I want to do is show you with this off. I'll have it bypassed over here, and then I'm going to engage it. So this is off to start. And then on. If you're listening in headphones or on speakers, you definitely heard that. Turn it back off. Turn it back on. So if you need to add a little bit more low-end girth to anything, try this Fat Effects bass enhancer. It's really cool. And if you have Logic, it's built right in there for you already. In the context of the mix, if I take this away, you'll notice that the kick drum just kind of disappears. It gets super thin compared to when it's on. So it's going to start with it on, and then I'm going to bypass it. Check it out.
Calling me at 2:45. Somebody ought to call the doctor when I'm back on my feet. Sending me messages incomplete. I barely take the time to read, 'cause I can follow the beat. I've been down, but I've never been down like this. I made something out of nothing.
Cool. So that's Fat Effects. I really like it. Again, I couldn't have gotten this specific kick drum sound without that plugin, maybe by piecing together a couple other plugins, but this did it really quickly in one plugin for me, which is super cool. So if you're using Logic, definitely try out Fat Effects. It's great for making things fat with a PH. Now, if you dug this song, this is a song called One Look. It's by my band Broke Royals. It is not currently out, but if you want to be the first to hear about it, there's a link in the description below where you can sign up to be the first to hear about it. So be sure to sign up for that. I'd love to share the song with you. I'm really proud of it, and I can't wait to get it out into this world. It's kind of like Arctic Monkeys meets Lucy Dacus is what I'm telling people. Anyway, check that out in the link in the description below. Well, let's go and jump over to another session, take a look at my third favorite plugin, which is TDR Nova. So here we have TDR Nova. This is from Tokyo Dawn Labs. This is a super cool dynamic EQ. Now, I know I said that we weren't going to be talking about EQ here, but this is a little bit different because this is a dynamic EQ. And the way that you typically are using dynamic EQs is to fix specific problems. And this is something that you don't have stock in Logic. You don't have stock in GarageBand or Pro Tools, or I don't think Pro Tools has a stock dynamic EQ. Anyway, you don't have stock in many places, and you can get this free one that can help fill that gap and allow you to fix specific things that you can't fix without a plugin like this. So this plugin is great if you have a vocal where when he goes to a certain note, you just get a little bit too much bass in his voice, but you don't want to always cut that bass in his voice because it sounds good everywhere else on the vocal. Or if you have some really harsh S's or sibilants, I've done a whole video on using this as a de-esser. This is one of my favorite de-essers. I'll link to it above here. I have other dynamic EQs. I have Pro Q3 from FabFilter, but there's just something about the interface from this that I just really, really like. So I highly recommend you grab this, even if you have other ones, because I think it just works well. Now, the idea here is that you have EQ bands, so you can set specific frequencies, and anytime you have the sound cross the threshold, it's going to get turned down at that frequency. So we have a threshold knob here for just this band. As I pull it down, anytime sound passes this band, it's going to just dip it down a little bit. Now in this specific case, I actually have the threshold set all the way up because what it is this is a drum loop and I have a clave that's hitting and I can't turn down that clave individually, but I can turn down the frequency of that clave only when it hits with this EQ. So if we look at this EQ, what it's doing, you'll see here when it goes to this section right here, you'll see these claves and they're spiking up really high. So anytime they're crossing my threshold, which is currently in line with this line right here, it's just going to dip it down a little bit. And it's not going to touch anything else. So it's not going to dip those frequencies down when you don't want it to, only when you do want it to. But if you have something a little bit lower, you could just bring your threshold down until it's catching it. Makes it really, really great for de-essing. Let's look at another example where I've used it on a vocal and an electric guitar. So we're in a different song. And if we look through this mix, you'll see I have TDR Nova all over this song. It's on this lead vocal track here. We have it on this guitar track here. And we have it on this bass track here. And the bass I want to start with because it's really kind of a very prime example of when I use this. Basically, the bass around 200 hertz, so if I kind of exaggerate that frequency on this bass here, sounds something like this. And it's not bad, but it can just get to be a little bit too much in the mix. It can start to make the mix feel pretty muddy. So I've cut it a little bit with this EQ. You can use it just as a standard EQ. We're using it to cut things, but then I've also set the threshold so that anytime it goes past this blue line right here, it's going to dip it down a little bit extra. That allows me to not have too much of a cut all the time, but anytime it gets to be too extreme, it will just pull it down a little bit extra. So it can really help balance out the tone of this bass guitar. So I'm like, boom, that note was just a little bit too much of that frequency, so it dipped it down just a little bit extra. I'm also using it, if we go down to this electric guitar here, I'm using it on this electric guitar, and there's just some times where the phrase that he's doing is just a little bit harsh. I think it's right around here. So you can see this frequency right up here, right around 2K, maybe 2500. This frequency is just a little bit harsh, and when he does this little line right here, it's just going to dip down just those harsh frequencies, which allows it to keep those bright present frequencies when it needs it, but just dip them down when they become too much. If we hit gain reduction delta here, it's going to show us just, or let us hear just what it's turning down, so check that out. So just a little bit kind of like fizzy upper mid-rangeness. And then finally, we're using it in this song on the lead vocal. And in kind of a similar way, we're addressing a little bit of harshness, but more than anything, we're actually addressing kind of a little bit of boxiness around 500. And it just depends on what he's doing. So if you're listening to the vocals here.
Satisfied, but you can't get your money back.
If we listen to the gain reduction delta of what it's doing, check that out.
I know that won't satisfy, but you can't get your money.
So it's just dipping those down a little bit so the vocal stays nice and clean and clear, but it doesn't lose those frequencies that allows it to have kind of a full nature when it needs it. So it's a best of both worlds. You can address it when it's a problem, but you can keep it when it's not a problem. So it's like EQ on steroids. So dynamic EQ is a very, very powerful tool. It's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more specific than regular EQ, but it's something that can help fix very specific issues in a very cool way. So I'll link to all these below. The Simatics, the Fat Effects is built into Logic, so I won't link to that one. And this TDR Nova and Simatics Origin are completely free, so be sure to grab them. You're gonna use them at some point, I promise. But if you're struggling to get a mix that you're happy with, definitely grab my 6-step checklist to a pro mix. It's completely free as well. It's really gonna help you get a better mix, so be sure to pick that up. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any favorite free plugins? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for good new ones that I haven't tried before. I also want to honorably mention Analog Obsession. If you haven't used any Analog Obsession stuff, it's all awesome and it's all free. You can support them on Patreon if you would like. If you have the means to, I highly recommend it. I didn't cover any of their stuff in this video just because it is, at least most of the ones I use are general EQs and compressors, but their stuff is great as well. Be sure to grab the 6-step checklist to a pro mix. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week where we'll look at some more of my favorite plugins of 2023.
One thing at a time.